of Montreal radio icon, CHOM FM's Terry DiMonte. Let's go!
Zander, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. How are you?
I'm doing very well. You?
Good. Are you wearing that Habs jersey just for me?
Boom, boom. Sweater and hat.
That's sweet. Are you a fan?
Yeah, I'm a very big fan.
Always. How did you become a Habs fan?
How did I become? So, I grew up in I was born and not really raised, but like I was born in Montreal.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, we lived in Montreal for like a year, 2 years,
Okay.
or 3 years, and then we came to Ottawa, and yeah.
So how old were you when you moved to Ottawa?
How old was I when I moved to Ottawa? Like 4, I think.
Never caught on with the Sens?
No, not really.
Cool.
But there's this guy in my class, named Ryan Frost. He adores the Sens.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You guys argue a lot?
No, not really. He's
okay.
a really good friend. We're all really good friends.
Cool. So I'm happy that you asked me to be on the podcast. That's my wife back there, Jess. She's just parenting something. Say hi, Jess. And my cat may make an appearance because he hangs out in my office a lot. So how did you I know it's your show, so I should let you interview me. How did you start the podcast, Zander?
So I got my microphone for a late birthday present, and
cool.
My dad started this Steelers pregame, halftime show, and then postgame show. So
right.
We like just talk about what we think's gonna happen in the game for the pregame, and then for the halftime we talk about like the last 2 quarters, and then we talk about what's gonna happen in the next 2 quarters, and then postgame we just talk about the game. Anyway, so my dad said, imagine if we start interviewing people. So our first guest, and then we just got we invited Brooke Henderson to be on my podcast, and she said yes, and it just took off from there.
That's pretty cool, man. That's very impressive. I'm such a massive fan of Jimmy Kimmel's.
Oh,
and
yeah.
When you're, I think he's your uncle, right? Is your
Jimmy Kimmel?
Not your uncle, not Jimmy. The others that told me that's in Montreal and said, check out my.
Yes, Johnny's telling me.
Johnny. How's he related to you?
So Uncle Johnny, he is on my dad's side.
Okay, so he's your
dad's brother.
Yeah, because he said you got to check out my nephew's podcast, and I was like, "Holy, it's Jimmy Kimmel!" That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And so yeah, is it all in not in aid of, but is it all part of it to help push the charity at CHO?
Yes. So you could donate on my website and all that stuff, and then you can buy my merchandise, which has that logo.
Cool. Okay, I'll shut up now, and I will be your guest.
Okay. So first off, I just want to say, thank you for joining my podcast, and I want to congratulate you on your incredible career in radio.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that, Zander. Thanks.
So I read that you were interested in radio at a very young age. What was it? What was the appeal? And were there any radio celebrities that inspired you to start doing radio?
It started pretty young with me. Pardon me. When I was probably 5 or 6 years old, my parents bought me. It's hard to describe, but it. Back when I was 5 or 6 years old, it's a long time ago, and they bought me like a portable record player, and it was like it had a plastic tone arm and a turntable, and in order for me to play something, they bought me a record. They bought me a record to put on the turntable, and they happened to reach for a record, and they brought home a Beatles record, and I fell in love with the Beatles record, played it over and over again. And I started to make the connection between the record that I was listening to on my little toy record player to the box that was on the kitchen counter in my house in Verdun, where I grew up. And I started to realize this little box was making, sometimes my dad would yell at it, sometimes my mom would sing along with it. Sometimes I would hear the music that I was playing on my little portable record player, and I thought, I don't know what's going on in that box, but that's cool. And as I got older, I started to become more fascinated with radio. I used to fall asleep with radios in my ear at night and drive my mom crazy. And then when I was a teenager, then I started to sort of clue into guys that were working on the radio. And there were a couple of guys in Montreal that I thought, wow, these guys are cool. They do amazing jobs. And it sounds like a lot of fun. And those guys were giants at the time. There was a morning man named Ralph Lockwood, whom I loved. I listened to when I was in high school, and a few other guys. Ralphie was, you know, a famous morning man long before the internet. So that when we got on the school bus in the morning, you know, nobody had phones. There was no internet. We all listened to the radio in the morning. So we get on the bus and talk about what Ralph had done in the morning, and they did outlandish stuff and pranks, and I started, he started to really make me pay attention to what I call the magic of radio.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So, and how important was it for your career to to work radio while at Abbott?
Abbott was nicely done. You've done your homework. Abbott was cool. Abbott was an introduction. There was a small radio station there, and it's kind of strange because, and you'll understand this because you're in school. There was kind of like, there were the jocks that played football, there was the hockey team, and there were the nerds, and there were the scientists, and there were the radio guys. And the radio guys were, excuse me, they were kind of a tough group to break into, but I hung around and hung around and hung around and started to really get an idea of what it would be like to be on the radio, because they had the equipment and we got to do shows. I mean, the shows didn't get broadcast over the air, but they were broadcast through the school. And I started to begin, that's where I really started to begin to try and see if this was something that I was going to enjoy. And I was hooked. So I didn't finish Abbott. I didn't graduate from Abbott because I got my first job when I was very young and had to leave the province to get started. But Abbott certainly had a big part in it.
So, like you said, there were like the radio guys in school, right?
Right.
So, how did you say that that the like the broadcast got posted to the did the broadcast get posted to the school?
Yeah, what happened was it was set up so that, you know, at that time, and still actually, you need a license to put a transmitter up. You put a transmitter up and you broadcast to the transmitter, and the transmitter sends the signal out to radios all across the area that you're broadcasting in. Abbott wasn't allowed to do that. So what the engineers did was they set up a studio and they ran wires so that it got pumped into certain sections of the school, so that if you were in the caf having lunch, you could listen to whatever show was on at that time. If you were in study hall, you could listen to a show that was on at that time, so that it got, what we were doing in the radio station got pumped into the school in the areas where people could listen without disturbing anybody. So it was kind of like a pretend broadcast, if you know what I mean.
Oh, so that's cool. So like, could everybody listen? Like, did the broadcast go to like all the rooms? Like everybody listened to it?
No, it didn't go to all the rooms, because like if you were in the library and you were studying, you didn't want to be bothered by what was coming out of speakers, right? Or if you were in a classroom and, you know, doing chemistry experiments, you didn't want to be bothered by what was coming out of the radio station and the speakers. But if you were hanging out eating lunch, if you were hanging out in the library or the smoking area, believe it or not, back in the 70s, there was an area where we could go smoke. I didn't smoke, thank God, but you could smoke at CJEP, and there was like a smoking lounge where people smoked.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. It's absolutely crazy to think about it now, but back in the 70s, if you wanted a cigarette, you had to go to the smoking lounge. You know, imagine
Really?
people 16, 17 lighting up a cigarette and going into the smoking lounge, and you could listen to the radio station in the smoking lounge. So there was a very long time ago when people weren't as we were a lot dumber back then, Zander.
I could never smoke because of my heart conditions.
Yeah, well, you know what? I have asthma, and when I was a kid, I had it really, really bad. And I was a kid before you had a puffer, and it was miserable. And the idea that if I would have smoked, I would have died. So I never smoked. I was lucky.
So, CHOM is a rock station. Was
Yes, sir.
rock your taste in like was rock your taste in music growing up? Like, did you like rock and roll music growing up?
Yeah, I liked all kinds of music. I grew up in a house where my parents listened to a lot of music, but my dad was a big fan of what we called what you would call I guess torch singers. You know, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, though, you know, people that were jazz singers and singers, you know, big band singers. So I was exposed to a lot of that when I was a kid, but I never caught on. And when I started to get interested in radio, there was that Beatles record my parents bought me. And when I was 11, 12, 13, I was really, really into pop music because I listened to a lot of AM radio. So I was really into top 40 music. And then once I became a teenager, like when I was 15, 16, and I started to become aware of Led Zeppelin and Elton John and Fleetwood Mac and Queen and those bands, that's when I really got turned on to rock and roll. And I was lucky because I've, for the most part, spent the better part of a almost 40-year career in rock radio. So that's been fun. I love all kinds of music, but rock is my first love.
That's awesome. So, like, I love rock and roll as well, and my favorite band is Queen.
Oh,
So
you
I
love
like,
Queen?
yeah, I like
Yeah,
Queen a lot.
that's very cool. Have you got a favorite record?
Uh, I like I don't know, but like I like Bohemian Rhapsody. I like the
Yeah,
songs.
yeah,
I like yeah, I like Freddie, you know, the
yeah.
lead singer.
You want to if you're a Queen fan, do yourself a favor and find a copy of the album called The Game and put your headphones on and crank it. It's
Really?
amazing. Yeah, the Queen. It doesn't get as much attention as the earlier Queen albums, but the sounds on that record and the rock on that record is amazing.
Really?
Highly recommend it. Yeah.
Okay, I might do it after this interview.
Okay, cool.
So you left Montreal early in your career, and again when you made the decision to move to Calgary. How difficult was it to start fresh in Calgary, and how much did you miss the city of Montreal?
Well, I'm born and raised in Montreal, so Montreal's home. And you know this. You where you're raised, where your family is, where your favorite parks are, where your favorite stores are. You know, you get comfortable, and it becomes home becomes a real source of comfort as you grow up. And I was born and raised in Montreal, and I was born and raised at a time when Montreal was a really, really big English city. And in order for me to get my start, I had to leave because you had to go find experience elsewhere, and no one would hire me in Montreal without experience. So when I was just about, I just turned 19 years old, I went out to Manitoba. So that was my first foray outside the city. So that gave me a little bit of experience in, excuse me, in 2007, when I decided to leave CHOM and go to Calgary. It was a little bit different because I was a grown man. I was 50 years old. I had just turned 50. So I'd been in Montreal for most of my life, except the time I was in Manitoba. And I really needed a change. And I got an opportunity to go to Calgary. And I thought, your life should have different chapters, different opportunities are presented to you, and there are different forks in the road. And this opportunity came up to go to Calgary, and I took it. So to answer your question, it was very tough. It was tough. It was scary. Even at 50 years old, I was going out to Calgary by myself. I didn't know anybody. Well, I knew a couple of people in Calgary, and it was a new job. Nobody knew who I was. When you start in a radio job, you start from the bottom. Nobody's ever heard of you. You go on the air day one, and then you try and build an audience. That was frightening. And of course, I missed most of my friends and family and favorite restaurants. And the only thing that I really took with me was when I got to Calgary, I ordered RDS, the French sports channel, so I could watch the Canadians. And that was a little bit of comfort for me. But to answer your question, it was very difficult. It was a big challenge, but challenges open your mind and make you, I think, a smarter and a better person if you're ready to tackle them. And I miss Montreal for sure, but I tried to embrace Calgary and tried to make Calgary my home while I was there.
So, I understand that you really missed, Montreal, and you really missed the restaurants and all the spots and all that stuff. But what did you miss? What was your the thing that you missed the most out of all those things?
Well, excuse me. Mostly it was the people, because I'd left a lot of friends behind, and when you're in the public eye, like I was and I am, you get to know managers of restaurants and fellow broadcasters, and I was well enough known in the community that I had a favorite spot and a favorite bar. It wasn't uncommon for me to sit with Bob Gainey and have a beer, or go to the Habs game with friends of mine that I've known for a long time. There were restaurants that I had a table that was just my table. When I would call, they'd say, "Yeah, Terry, your table will be waiting for you." Those kinds of things they kind of wrap around. They kind of hug you. It's a comforting feeling. So those are the kinds of things I missed. It was not so much the things and the places, but the people that helped make Montreal my home. I miss that the most.
So, you're one person behind a microphone, but you entertain thousands of Montrealers daily. How are you able to get a feel for what engages your listeners?
Well, that's an excellent question. And that kind of is the essence of a good morning radio show. You have to reflect the community you live in back out to the community that's listening. So you have to, I'm never not thinking about the show. If I'm out in the afternoon and I see something that's changed, or a building that's coming down, or a new store or restaurant that's opened, and I think to myself, got to mention that tomorrow. What time am I going to mention that? How am I going to mention it? How am I going to bring it up? Is it important to people? What are people talking about? What kind of mood are people in? I don't know about you, but on a Monday morning, I feel a lot different than I do on a Friday morning, right? Fridays are like, yes, weekend is on us. We've got, tickets for the game, or we're going to, we've got hockey practice in the morning, whatever. Monday's kind of like, Monday's a tough sort of slog. So when you sit in the chair, you have to kind of try and put myself in the headspace of, okay, what time is it? What are people doing? If I go on the air at 5:30, the tone of what I'm saying and the sort of nature of what I'm talking about is a little different at 5:30 than it is at like 8 o'clock, because 8 o'clock people are caught in traffic and probably up already. 5:30, a lot of people are standing around in their underwear making coffee, or just trying to roll out of bed. So you got to try and put yourself. I always think to myself, what would I be doing? What would be important to me? Like when the pandemic hit, it was you got to sort of have a balance. Like you want to talk about the pandemic, you want to talk about wearing your mask and minding your manners and making sure you clean, wash your hands all the time. But you don't want to bore people with that over and over and over again. You got to try and find a balance. So you have to be keenly aware of what's going on in the city, what's important to the city, and what's important to your audience. So the people that are listening to a rock and roll radio station in the morning, they're looking for something different than someone who's listening to an all news station in the morning. So you got to try and figure out, it's kind of like a guessing game a little bit. You got to try and figure out how best to serve your audience and how to reflect the community back to them. I explained it once to a class. It's a Montrealer living in Montreal, speaking to Montrealers. A guy like Stuntman Stu in Ottawa is a guy that, lives in Barhaven, I think. So, like a guy who lives and works in Ottawa and works at an Ottawa radio station talking to people that live in Ottawa. It's his job to reflect Ottawa back out to the people who are listening. That's a long-winded answer, Zander. I'm sorry about that, but I hope I made a little bit of sense.
Yeah, you did. So I'm guessing you kind of answered like a little follow-up question that I'm about to ask, but like how do you know how do you know what the other people who are listening, like the listeners, know what they like to keep them entertained? Like how do you know what songs to put on, and how do you know what to say and all that stuff?
Well, you don't really. I mean, that's what I mean. It's kind of a guessing game. I have to start with some assumptions, right? People that are listening to CHOM are rock fans, so you got to think, okay, in the morning, what I try and do is I try and keep the music super familiar, because you don't want your brain isn't fully engaged in the morning. So you don't want to have to think too much. I don't want to have to say, hey, here's a new record you've never heard, turn this up. The morning's not a place for that. You want to hear things that make you, sort of bop your head and like Bohemian Rhapsody, right? If I say Bohemian Rhapsody to you right now, you can hear it in your head and so can I, right? Because it's super familiar. So that's part of the morning show, making sure the music is familiar. The music is rock and rock based, because that's what a CHOM audience is coming for. And a CHOM audience is not coming to listen to an interview with the premier. A CHOM audience wants to hear about, what happened with the Canadians, maybe talk a little sports, maybe talk a little controversial things in the music world. Like this week, these last couple of weeks, we did a thing called Musical Madness, which was like a playoff with bands. We put bands up against each other. Like Bryan Adams went up against David Bowie, and a caller has to call in and pick, the band he wants to move forward in the bracket, like the basketball Final Four kind of thing. So people who listen to the CHOM morning show are looking for something easier on the mind. They want to hear their rock music. They want to hear a little bit of news, and they want to have a little bit of fun. And I have to figure out what that would be. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes, stuff that I do just falls flat. And other times, you can tell by the text and the reaction and stuff that it takes off. But part of it is in here. Part of it is my gut. After so many years on the radio, I think to myself, this is going to work and that's not going to work. A lot of it is sort of instinct with me anyway.
Radio, radio, radio has changed so much over the years with people listening to playlists on their phone. Do you think there will be an audience for morning radio? Like,
I I do, and here's why, Xander. And I don't know if this theory is going to hold, but I've always believed that radio isn't about the music. It's not about the commercials. Radio is about human connection. Radio is about people connecting with each other. And the most the story that I tell to try and describe that is, you know, years ago when people had the radio, or you could bring a bunch of CDs with you in the car, right? Before Spotify and all of that, you were driving from Ottawa to Toronto, you go through your CD collection, you put a bunch of CDs in the front seat, and you'd roll the windows down and start popping in songs that you wanted to crank, songs you wanted to sing along with. And everybody, after about an hour and a half or 2 hours in the car by yourself with the music that you've chosen, you get a craving to have human contact. You want to hear somebody say, hey, sunny and 12 tomorrow, and here's what's coming up, and here's what you're facing if you're driving on the 401 this afternoon. When you listen to the radio, the guy who's behind the microphone, his job is to connect with you. And you have to connect without pictures, just words and just sounds. And that always, to me, has been the real connection. People want human interaction. People listen to the radio because they like the comfort of that person they're listening to. They want to be kept company. They want another person to keep them company on the car ride. And I always thought that has been the essence of radio, has been, you know, I heard somebody refer to it as radio is anthropological. It's human beings talking to each other. And even though you can't talk to the radio, you listen to the radio when you started this conversation, this interview, you said to me, were there personalities that I admired when I was a kid listening to the radio? That's the magic of radio. If you're doing it right, it reaches through the speakers and it comes and it grabs you and it grabs your attention. I think that's the essence of the medium. I think that's the magic. There's still a little magic in the radio. Like when somebody says your name on the radio, if somebody talks about your hockey team on the radio, somebody wishes you a happy birthday on the radio, it's momentarily a buzz. It's still cool, right? It's wow, that person is talking to me through that little box. I've always thought that was the essence of what makes radio work, and that's never gone away. So you can listen to Spotify all you like, but if you're looking for someone to put an arm around you and tell you that the world is still in one piece and that it's going to snow tomorrow and school's probably canceled, that's the essence of radio. So that is another one of my patented long-winded answers to say that I think even with Spotify and the internet, I think there's still a place for radio.
yeah, it's cool because like it's never gonna be it's always gonna be like it's just gonna be different if there's no more radio, you know, because
Yeah,
like it you have to have radio.
yeah.
Because
If there's no radio, that voice will be silenced, and
exactly.
the world will be a different place without that voice. And you know, I've been in radio so long that I've been around that, you know, a lot of things. You know, when music television came on the air in 1982 or whatever it was, everybody thought, well, nobody's going to listen to radio anymore. Everybody's just going to watch music television. And I said, no, you know, one thing about music television back then, I used to say, there are no pictures in radio. Radio is a big part of the imagination, right? If I say to you, if you know, if I say to you, a giant yellow building just on the side of the 417 is on fire near Bronson. As an Ottawa person, you see a yellow building in your brain and you see Bronson, the exit sign, and you see the 417. That's the connection. That's what makes people connect with the radio. That Spotify and the internet can't do that. Can't do that. That's why you have to be a person reflecting the community back to the community, and you'll make a connection with them.
When you first started at CHOM or while in Manitoba, were you creating your own song list or was it like programmed for you?
Back when I started Zander, I had to create my own song list.
Really? You had to
Yeah,
create your own.
it was way cool, like seriously cool. I would, you know, if I was sitting here where the microphone is, there would be behind me a whole wall of albums. And this is what it looked like. I hope this doesn't bore you, but this is what it looked like back in 1978 when I started. The this is in the control room. They drew a clock, and this is 12 o'clock, and this is 6 o'clock, and this was you know 10 to and 20 after, and on the clock there were dots: red dot, green dot, blue dot, yellow dot, yellow dot, blue dot, green dot, yellow dot, green dot. And every time you came to a dot, you had to go to the albums behind you and find an album with a song that had a blue dot next to it. So you could play anything you wanted there as long as it was the blue dot. And then you had to follow it with the red dot. So you had to follow along to a clock, but you had to put the music set together. And my boss said to me when I started, he said, when you're looking at your clock and when you're trying to pick your records, you're taking your audience on a ride. And he said, you want your hour to go like this. You want to take them up, rock them hard, then bring them down a little bit, then take them back up a bit. So you had to, in your mind, put a set of music together that was dynamic and took the listener on a ride. And I never had more fun in my life. Now it's all done by computer. And I get a list. Yeah, I get a list now that's just like it's a list. And you know, up next is this, up next is this. And the only thing that helps me is I've been around so long. I've been on the radio so long in Montreal. I have the permission to change what I want to change. So if I see a song and go, now that doesn't fit there, they let me change it. And that's because I was trained with this, right? I learned how to make this sing. So now when I look at the list on a piece of paper, I go, nah, that doesn't belong there. Let's change that. But again, to answer your question, when I started, it was all up to us.
So you were on air during some pretty terrible times, including the shooting at the École Polytechnique and 9/11.
Yeah.
Do you recall what it was like to focus on your job, and what was your approach to your shows during those difficult times?
Those were really tough days. You know, I don't want to make it sound like you know, it was, you know, the people had it really, really tough for the people that were at those horrible disasters. But like I was saying to you before, you have to reflect the community. And the night of the Polytechnique shooting, I happened to be out. I was out and away from the radio. And again, it was in an era where there were no phones and there was no internet. And I was out for dinner and I was out with friends, and We weren't near radios. We didn't turn on the television. And I said, look, I got to get up early. I got to work in the morning. And I went home and I went right to bed. And it was late, so I didn't sleep very long. And I got up the next morning. And on my way into work in those days, I would listen to a guy named George Balkan. George Balkan was a longtime morning man here in Montreal, and he worked at the news station. And I turned him on at 5:30 when I was driving into work. And he took a long pause and a long sigh, and he said, Montreal will never be the same again. And I thought, that's an odd way to open the program. And he began to tell the story of what had happened the night before. And I was shocked and stunned and saddened. And when I got to work, I had to readjust everything. I threw all the music out. You had to pick records that were appropriate and were not sad records, but you didn't want to play Twist and Shout or Who Wants to Have a Party. And you had to talk about what had happened and try and comfort the people that were listening. It was very, very, very difficult, and I trusted my instincts is what I did. And it's the same after 9/11. 9/11 was terrible because, I mean, the tragedy, I don't need to tell you, was horrible to have witnessed, but it also lingered for like a week or two. We didn't know how to be normal again after what had happened. It was really very, very strange. You couldn't be funny. Nobody wanted you to be flippant. It was a struggle to try and find a balance. And then a couple of weeks later, things started to go back to normal. But those two in particular, and a couple of more, were very, very. They challenged my skills as a communicator.
So you said that those times were like very rough. And sorry, how long did you say that things went back to normal?
Well, if you look at what happened after 9/11, it was at least, it was, I don't know, I'm not sure of the exact timeline. It was at least 10 days, maybe more. And I don't know if you're interested in broadcast history, Zander, but if you are, I highly recommend that you go on YouTube and you Google David Letterman after 9/11. And I don't know, you probably know this, Jimmy Kimmel worships the ground David Letterman walks on. David Letterman he was the king of late night television. Kimmel loves him. And Kimmel sort of modeled his style after Dave. And Dave was the first late night television show to go back on the air. And he sat at the desk that night with only a couple of guests. And he sat at the desk and he talked for 17 minutes about, can we be funny again? Can we ever go back to normal? And he gave this remarkable speech from his desk as a talk show host that set the tone and changed the tone of what everybody was thinking back then. And if I'm not mistaken, that tape of Dave doing that night, trying to put things back to normal, is in the American Broadcast Hall of Fame down in the States. It's quite something, and that will give you a timeline and an idea of how things began to go back to normal.
So you joined the recording industry while in Winnipeg and worked with some great Canadian bands like Street Heart.
Yeah.
So me and my dad say that their version of Under My Thumb is better than the Rolling Stones version. Do you agree?
100%.
100%.
100%. That 6.5 minutes on that record, it is amazing. And live, which I saw hundreds of times, that 6.5 minutes was sometimes 15 minutes live. It was an amazing cover of a great song and I think it's way better than the Stones version. I really do.
I
I think you and your dad have great taste.
I listened to both of them in the shower, and you know, I got my conclusion down, and I thought that, you know,
Yeah, just
yeah.
listening to the guitar solo in the Street Heart version is enough to put you over the top.
So you have had the opportunity to interview some very talented guests in studio over the years.
Yeah.
Are there any that really stand out for you?
Yeah, there is a lot. There's, and they're in different categories. There's there are hockey stars from my childhood. Bobby Orr, Guy Lafleur, Ken Dryden. Those guys were, they were they're legends, and I got to talk to them. Musically, I've not only been able to interview guys who I bought tickets to go see them, and now I've interviewed a couple of them so much that I consider them to be friends. Dennis DeYoung from Styx, and Roger Hodgson from Supertramp, and Krista Berg and John Bon Jovi and Melissa Etheridge, and people of that ilk. I've had the opportunity to interview some premiers, some unbelievably, one of the things that I always remember are, I've been lucky enough to interview some unbelievably remarkable families at children's hospitals, radiothons. A lot of them I remember vividly. So yeah, I've been really, really lucky. Interviewing is my favorite thing to do. And I've been lucky enough to sit across from some people that I never thought I would meet, never mind interview. And I'm still jealous of you with Kimmel. I'm such a fan of Kimmel's. It was, and by the way, Zander, you did a great job.
Thank you very much. Um, what is the best part of your job, and what is it that makes Montreal, and what is it that makes Montreal and its people great?
The best part of my job is the satisfaction that comes with being part of the community in a special way. People. I've been on the radio in Montreal so long, I kind of feel like I'm kind of sort of part of the fabric of the city. People remember me from schools I went to, and people remember me from all that I did at the house, which is broadcasting. It's a real privilege to be in people's homes every day. I think the idea that I could do what I love and be paid well to do something that I enjoy, those things are special. Not everybody gets that, and that's what makes the job so special. Also, doing the morning show at a radio station that I grew up listening to, something I never thought was going to happen to me, and it's seriously cool. And Montrealers are great for so many reasons. I think the fact that we live in two languages, I think the fact that we eat later, dinner in Montreal is usually, this is before the pandemic. Montrealers eat later, they drink more wine, they dance to the wee hours of the morning, the bars are open late. There's a real zest for life in Montreal. Everything is about, we'll worry about that Monday. Let's enjoy life while we can. And living in the two cultures, the French and the English hanging out together, and making the city that gives the city the European vibe. I think Montrealers are unique. They live differently than the rest of the country. Most of us are, most of us are proud to be Canadians, but most of us are proud to be Quebecers, and proud of the way, they call Quebec a distinct society, and it is. Quebec, Montreal's a big city, Toronto's a big city, Vancouver's a big city, but Montreal's a little bit different than Toronto and Vancouver. It's got a little more pizzazz.
So we have some rapid fire questions now.
Love it.
Are you
Love
okay
it.
with
Yes,
that?
sir.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. What was the greatest rock concert you've ever attended in Montreal?
Elton John in 1973.
What do you think is the one song you've played the most on air?
Probably You Shook Me All Night Long, AC/DC.
Have you ever slept in and ended up being late for work?
3 times.
3 times.
3 times in 37 years.
Favorite thing to do in Montreal?
Dinner out. Dinner at a favorite restaurant.
Best Montreal venue for a concert?
Gotta go with Théâtre Saint-Denis. It's a soft seater, about 2,000 people. So you can't see a real big band there, but if you get a chance to see a band there, one night I saw Steely Dan there, never forget it. My favorite venue.
Let's see here. What are a couple of your all-time favorite bands?
Elton John is my all-time favorite artist. Styx is an all-time favorite band, and the Beatles are the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing. So I got to put them on the list too.
Who is your favorite Montreal athlete of all time? And it doesn't have to be like one specific athlete. It could even be like a Montreal team.
Living in the era that I lived in when the Canadians won the Stanley Cup every year, that's a tough one. I would have to say, because of what everything that he represents and represented, because of his elegance and his class and his decency and what he brought to the game and how he changed the game, it would have to be Jean Beliveau.
Let's see here. The Montreal food you crave most often?
That's I'm gonna have to go with steamed hot dogs. All dressed steamed
hot dogs, amazing.
Yeah, all dressed steamed hot dogs.
We have some actually like a couple of days ago.
Did you?
We went to what's this called? Belle Province.
Belle Province. You know what? Well, I was right outside the store at the kitchen table. 10 minutes to 6, I was eating steamed hot dogs.
No. Who is your favorite oh, sorry, hold on. Did you ever have a major blooper on air? I just did a blooper.
So did I. I did. I had a bad one, a real bad one once. I'm not a handy guy. I can't hammer a nail. I'm no good with a screwdriver. I can't fix things at all. And one morning when I was working at CJAD, which was the talk station, at around 5:30, my microphone button broke. And I picked up a screwdriver. I don't know where I found a screwdriver. And I was trying to pop the button up so that I could push the microphone button down, because I couldn't get the microphone button down, so I couldn't go on the air. And I was tired and I was grumpy, and I hadn't had a coffee, and I hadn't slept much that night, and I was moving the screwdriver around, and I was like, come on. And I let an F-bomb fly, and I let the F-bomb fly just as the screwdriver was pushing the mic on the air. So yeah, exactly. It went out on the air. And I was lucky on a couple of counts. Number one, it was 5:30 in the morning, so there wasn't a lot of people listening. And number two, I owned it right away. I went on the air and I said, listen, I'm very, very, very sorry. I really want to apologize. Let me explain to you what happened. That was an accident. It was uncalled for. It was unprofessional. And I'm very, very sorry. And usually when you're honest with your audience and you own it, you're okay. And as it turned out, I guess what I did worked, because nobody complained. My boss never heard about it. And it was forgotten until now that I'm telling you the story.
If you can do a show with anybody, with any radio personality, past or present, who would it be?
Uh, wow, that's an excellent question, Xander. Um, I loved doing radio with. I'm gonna pick I'm gonna pick a dead guy, Ralph Lockwood, the guy that I listened to in high school. And my old partner is still with us. He's alive. I'd like to do another radio show with him. His name is Ted Bird. We were together for 19 years on the radio, and never had more fun than I had when I worked with Ted.
That's awesome. So, this is our end of our podcast. Our interview. Thank you so much for joining. It was amazing. We had so much fun, and I would love if when this COVID stuff is done, I would love to visit your studio.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for asking me. It was an absolute pleasure. You're prepared and you're sweet and you've asked great questions and you're really good at this, and congratulations to you for doing it. And a tip of the cap, I'm not wearing one, but a tip of the cap for everything you're doing for CHO. And I want you to go to Kimmel's first and then come see me so you can tell me all about meeting Jimmy Kimmel. But you're welcome in my studio anytime, pal. Anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's like, thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you soon.
Okay, bye, Zander.
Bye. See you later.
Ciao.